It really is history, Jeremy, because, you know, this is a man around whom the politics of Zimbabwe have revolved for the past 3.5 decades, in fact, almost 4 decades. Robert Mugabe really at the center of Zimbabwean politics, for better or worse. And so, I mean, the story, the narrative of this country has been framed around, you know, what is Robert Mugabe up to as president? What has he been doing? What is the latest decision his government has taken? How is it relating with the international community? How is it relating with the opposition? And so to see a man who is now, you know, very late in his life, an elderly man, frail, walking, you know, gingerly, with Grace Mugabe next to him, and seeing him come to cast his ballot in this place, which, you know, has a spiritual significance, political significance to him, in that, I mean, he used to live here, and actually there's a deep connection in terms of the roots of the struggle of Zimbabwe, as well as the post-liberation story of Zimbabwe. To see him come here, and you can tell that things are not what they used to be, but not downplaying that as he was coming, you could hear before you could see him. We heard that he was coming before we could see him, simply because there were people who lined the street that runs outside Mofu Primary School here in Highfield that were chanting Kushungo, Kushungo, and we knew that something was at hand, and we stood up and we really started running after that historic picture that we saw. So to actually see a man who was in power, whose grip on power once seemed unbreakable, and see him now as a civilian, coming here as an old man to cast his ballot, still enjoying the protection from the state, the security afforded to him, surrounding him. But I can tell you, it really wasn't what it used to be. The fact that I was able to get so close to him after he cast his ballot and was approaching the vehicle that has been allocated to him by the state, and I was within a meter of him, which is why I was screaming and shouting and you know, making those noises I was making to throw anything at him in the hope of a reaction. It tells you that even the security is much more relaxed. I mean, the guys could see that I was very close to him, but, you know, they couldn't be bothered to move me any further away. But there is a story, of course. This talks to the many layers of the Zimbabwean story. Those people who are chanting Kushungo, Kushungo, you've got to know the context in which they're doing this. It's a context where he has fallen completely out of favor with ZANU-PF. So you've got to think, what is their purpose? Why are they chanting Kushungo, Kushungo? Is it genuine support for former President Robert Mugabe? Is it organized? Because, you know, some people continue to wonder about whether he has any political machinations left in him. He addressed a media conference yesterday, and that's been read in all sorts of ways about what the significance is, and also the timing. So it gives you just another layer of this Zimbabwean political story that is playing itself out on election day.
Well, let's pick up on that point about his role going forward, if in fact there is one. Did you get the sense that this was simply nostalgic support for someone who had deep roots, as you say, in the community, or might this be taken as some sort of sign of a political resurrection? One senses it's not going to be the latter, though.
Hard to tell, Jeremy, but I do suspect that, I mean, the way in which events transpired in November last year, and I've said this before, that basically the intervention of the military and the events that then unfolded subsequent to that sort of had the effect of putting a full stop to the political tensions that had been brewing without ZANU-PF. But what was the context of that full stop? What was the settlement of what the differences were? I mean, if you had people that strongly supported former President Robert Mugabe at that point in November, what happens to them? Did they suddenly disappear? Certainly, in as far as, loudly expressing that support, they sort of went underground in a way, quote unquote, went underground. You would battle to find someone in November that would have come up and said, I'm a firm Mugabe supporter, I will go wherever he goes, I will follow him all the way. And you then ask yourself, did people simply stop supporting him, or did people just decide that, you know what, it's not prudent for me to actually express that support. And so when you hear people chanting Kushungo, Kushungo, which is his clan name, you then ask yourself, what is the story here? And also, I mean, you then have the other side as well, because prior to coming to power, the side that is now in power, led by Emmerson Mnangagwa, that faction of ZANU-PF, was the side against the ropes. They were the ones who were facing a situation where the onslaught was against them, and they could barely really speak up and express their genuine opinion, simply because Mugabe held the ropes of power, and Grace Mugabe was a powerful figure in Zimbabwean politics at that time. So there's a sense of business that was not really completed in terms of the split within ZANU-PF. And there continued to then be this narrative that says, what does Mugabe do now if he has any political capital left in him? And people were starting to associate him with all sorts of machinations. When the National Patriotic Front, that organization, was being formed, people were saying he's sort of like the spiritual father thereof. And so, I mean, it's that layer of the politics of Zimbabwe that remains really hard to read.